And welcome back to Mixed Media. We're live again for another week of this awesome podcast that happens every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. Ignore everything that says anything else on the screen. That is the true time, every Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. And what we do on the show is we do a live podcast, which means that you can be part of the show, which is super awesome because we get to have live discussions, which is super cool. So if you want to join the discussion, it's as simple as chatting. We're pretty much guaranteed to read your chat out loud. So if you go ahead and do that, we'd love to respond to what you have to say. But before we continue, we should introduce ourselves. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania. Oh,
sorry, I hit the space bar to unmute and something weird came up, so I don't know. Hi, my name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
And my name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
Sweet. And does one of you want to explain what the show is? Because I feel like I explain the show a lot.
Sure. Well, Mixed Media is a weekly podcast dedicated to all things art. And we tend to focus on our areas of specialty, but not exclusively. We branch out and talk about other things. Economics. Last week, Irving read some documents from a court case related to the arts. So we talk about lots of different stuff. We also try and keep it relevant, right? We have arguing with Reddit, which you'll see later. Find out what that is. And just kind of like to have a good time talking about art. So if you like any kind of art, we probably have some show we've done that touches on something that you're interested in. We have a pretty enormous catalog of things over the last over 2 years now of a weekly podcast. So yeah, it's probably something for you. And if not, if you see something that looks interesting to somebody that send it their way. With that, special shout out, of course, to our supporters on Locals, K. Kairos, Alex Egbert, 99 Crime, and Post. Their contributions really help us, keep this show going. You can join them by support us on our Locals page, and you can also find links. So you can find links to where you can support us, as well as our Discord page, where we talk about art all week, and to everywhere we're streaming. Right down here, mixedmediapodcast.com.
Yep. And how are you guys' weeks? What's going on in y'all's worlds?
I got a typewriter. It arrived today. Did I mention this before or no? Is this new?
You did mention it last week, yeah.
Okay, so it actually arrived. So I guess probably maybe tonight. I don't know. We'll see. Tonight or tomorrow, probably I will post an image of some words or something from the typewriter in the literature channel.
Mm. The downside to a typewriter, I suppose, though, in the modern world is you probably need paper and ink, right, to actually have it function.
Yeah. So the ink, the nice part is that for some reason there's still, even though there are no companies that make typewriters anymore, there are companies that will, for I guess the few of us who use typewriters now, there are companies that will produce the ink ribbons that are used for typewriters, which is interesting. And as for paper, I heard that you could just use standard paper and it works fine or whatever. Apparently the thickness does matter because too thin and the hammers will hit the thing behind it too hard and create dents, and too thick and you won't get a good mark. So I don't know. There is people do sell paper branded for typewriters, but I hear that it's not that worth the price. You should usually just use regular paper anyways. But yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Nothing really remarkable for me. I think I spent a fair amount of time over the weekend following the International Lindy Hop championships, which a bunch of people that I know were competing at and did pretty well. It's kind of cool seeing that, but otherwise, nothing really remarkable.
Yeah, for me, was in Jersey over the weekend, so that occupied a lot of my time. But other than that, work. Nothing terribly interesting to report. But how about on the news side of things? Anything interesting there?
Am I frozen? Oh, it looks like I was frozen for a second. Okay.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Any news?
Honestly, I haven't seen anything interesting in terms of music. Yeah, nothing interesting enough to mention.
Right. For me, the only thing I noticed, because so if you didn't know, there was a big blockbuster release, much anticipated new entry into the Mad Max franchise, Mad Max Furiosa, which I saw a lot of talk about. I saw the trailer only like a week before start. I don't know why I didn't know it was happening. But the director, George Miller, he's an interesting guy because I just assumed that he was like some big, he's huge, obviously, but I assumed that he like probably had a large catalog of films, and I was like interested. I was like, maybe because I haven't seen the original. There's 4 Mad Maxes. 3 of them are an original trilogy. The 4th one is a new trilogy, all by the same director. The trilogies are apparently basically unrelated to each other, even though they have the same franchise name, like even in concept. So, yeah, that's a whole thing. But I assume the director had a huge, deep catalog, because the old Mad Maxes are from like, I think the first one's like 1989 maybe or something like that. So I assumed that since he'd been directing this franchise this long, that he'd have a deep catalog, and I was gonna go I was like, yeah, maybe I'll do a director study. Maybe it'll be interesting because I don't know anything about Australian film. I don't know anything about, this dude. Then I checked his catalog. It's all Mad Max. That's all it is. That's all he's ever done. That's all he's ever done. But you can expect my next episode. It is I will either talk about Mad Max if I have actual interesting thoughts about it, because I will watch not the original trilogy probably by then, but I'll probably watch the new trilogy, the first one, and then the second entry into it. Because my goodness, when I saw the trailer for Mad Max Fury Road when I was in high school on the TV. Like, I was barely, like, just getting into film, and just the colors and, like, the scenery and the real action set pieces. I remember there was a commercial on the longer side that kind of went into the special effects, which they actually blow up these trucks, they actually, there's actually big fireballs, classic Hollywood, style shooting, very, the only people who shoot like that anymore are like Nolan, Scorsese, if he's doing an action flick, so, it's awesome to see it because it just looks better. Everyone knows it looks better. You look at it and you're like, that looks so much better because it's real. So, yeah, so I'm excited to check them both out. I'm a little wary because I saw that, for Furiosa that the, numbers came in below expectations, and then I saw some grumbling. So I refrained from reading anything. So I don't know what the grumbling is about, and I don't know why it underperformed. So I'm scared, but hopefully it'll be a worthwhile experience watching them both at some point.
Now, question: do you think that visual effects will get better if you just have AI doing it 100%?
No. Not for the time being, at least.
I meant that somewhat, trying to pull out some reaction. I assume that's what your answer is going to be, but
I tend to do a lot of compositing for my work. So I spend a lot of time in Photoshop, and so I actually have AI has actually been extremely beneficial to my Photoshop workflow because I don't have to find stuff to composite anymore that I'm legally allowed to composite, into an image. I can just Photoshop is a built-in tool, so I can literally pull in an AI part and it kind of seamlessly, whatever. But although it has probably increased my efficiency drastically on that kind of work, maybe by 30%, it takes 30% less time, and maybe the output's actually 10% better, something like that. The amount of massaging is still a decent amount. I'm not just cutting a piece out and then the AI draws the frame and then it's done. I have to fix it, it never comes out right. So I still have to massage, the whole thing. Video, that's probably if Photoshop is not just plug and play. I mean, imagine every frame, in a movie that would be practical with blur and everything. No, it's not happening anytime soon. So, yeah, that'd be my opinion on that. But that's all I noticed. How about you, Nathan?
A couple of things. So one of them is straight up confusing me. I don't know what's going on here, but I'm seeing reviews for the Lenovo Legion Go, which is apparently a Lenovo mobile console type thing. It looks, from the image, it's hard to tell. It looks smaller than the Steam Deck, maybe. But so I've never heard of this in my life. That would be insane. I don't know, because apparently I'm seeing articles about it from last year. I don't know what that reviews. I don't know. I think these are pre-release reviews. I think. Because there are also another wave of reviews that came out 2 days ago, so I don't know what's happening. But the only reason why I knew this existed is because the news is that there's a light version coming out. I don't know, I don't know, but this must have come out earlier because on the Lenovo website there are 461 reviews. Are these reviews dated? I wonder. 3 days ago. Oh, 3 days ago. 17 hours ago. Oh, okay. I guess it literally just came out. Okay, there you go. Oh, no, actually, we have one from 3 months ago, one from 5 months ago.
Wait, what is the name of the device?
Lenovo Legion Go.
Okay.
Yeah, so that I don't know what's happening. Interesting. Aside from that, the Xbox announced that upcoming consoles, or at least the next Xbox, I guess we don't know about subsequent ones, but the next Xbox will have a similar sort of third-party manufacturer idea to GPUs, where there's some, some general design given, or I guess kind of specific design given that. Okay, so I guess let me explain. So for GPUs that graphics cards in your computers, there are various manufacturers. Now the name manufacturer is entirely misleading because they don't actually manufacture anything. Typically, what they do is they design things like the cooling for the graphics card. Now, the actual core technology, the most important part of the technology, is designed by either AMD, NVIDIA, or Intel 99% of the time, essentially, for the graphics card. So what they do is they take the GPU little chip thing, which is very tiny, you can fit in the palm of your hand, and also they don't even design the PCB, I don't think either, that goes behind it. So I guess they have they have a giant slab of electronics pretty much, and decide how do I want to cool it, how do I make it look cool, and that's pretty much it. So,
don't they have the Founders Edition? How does that work?
The Founders Edition is a reference card.
Yeah,
it's the name of the NVIDIA reference card. Yeah, so also AMD and NVIDIA, and I think Intel probably does this too with their newer GPU line, will create these things called reference cards, or NVIDIA calls them Founders Edition cards, where they're essentially just, when they first release the GPU, before releasing them, before the manufacturers are allowed to sell them, they sell their own special overly priced, I mean, not they're not outrageously priced, I guess, but I don't know, they're just their reference card, and they're limited. That's the thing, right? There's only a limited number of these designs, so you buy them, and once they're gone pretty much. So yeah, the manufacturers will deal with the rest of the stuff, and yeah, so they'll apparently be doing that for the Xbox. So I don't think this means too much really. It'll still be like different manufacturers, yes, their GPUs will have different performances because they'll overclock it slightly, and it really is slight. Like it doesn't actually matter. It almost never matters. You can also just do it yourself too. I guess you are guaranteed to get a GPU that can overclock to whatever amount, but like you've gone lucky if you can't do it. I don't know. Like it's never that much overclocking. So you might see that with these Xboxes too. Is a little bit of overclocking applied. It's not going to be that different. You're going to still be running, basically the same performance. And the Xbox might look cool. Like they might have different designs. So I guess that might be cool. But other than that, I don't think it really matters that much. So yeah, that's all I got.
Sweet. All right. Well, shall we continue to our first segment? Ben, you want to preview the topic real quick?
Yeah, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the question of translation in music, but also a little bit more broadly. Whether translation is ever appropriate, and if so, when and how do you do it? And my answer is I don't really have an answer, but we'll get to that. So yeah.
Sweet. All right, here we go.
Mixed Media Music.
All right, welcome to Mixed Media Music, the portion of Mixed Media Podcast dedicated to all things music. Usually, tonight we're going to expand a little bit beyond music a bit. We can be a little bit more mixing medias, media, plural of medium. Yeah, so my name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer, and I'll let my co-hosts introduce themselves.
So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
And my name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
All right. So now I wanted to talk about the question of translations in works of art. And yeah, like I said, this applies to music. It's first where I kind of started thinking about this. But I think it also applies to other forms of art, right? It definitely applies to literature, writing, right? And even to something like, things like theater, and to film, right? And probably also, I don't know, are there foreign language video games, Nathan?
Yeah, I'd say there are yes.
Okay. So it's applicable to a lot of arts, and pretty much anything that involves speech, right? Mm-hmm. Even something that replicates speech, like writing, right? Okay. So, my background, going back to my freshman year of college, I was given a really specific, this is what you were supposed to think about translations in works of art, in particular in music. So the first, I'd say I want to break this down into the two parts, right? So, do we translate something, and if we translate it, when and how should we do it? So okay, if we look at just at music, right? And this is obviously going to be a vocal music, right? Whether that's just what we call art songs, or any kind of song in another language, or something like larger scale, like an opera. Well, the reality is, they're looking at a classical music canon in particular. Most of it is not in English, especially prior to maybe around the mid 20th century. Certainly nothing before then was nothing. Very little before then was written in English. If you look at operas, right, it's a lot of Italian, German, French. There are a lot of the languages that a lot of the our music is in the classical world, and obviously lots of music out there in other languages. So, but I also come at this from the perspective of somebody who did a ton of Russian literature and language in my undergraduate, and worked in translation for Duolingo on the Russian for English speakers and English for Russian speakers team. So yeah, but that's a little bit different when you think about person to person communication. That's not quite the same thing as art. And I've got a lot of different opinions on when someone should translate and how someone should translate. And I'm not gonna be too technical about how to translate, because I mean that's you can spend your life figuring out how to do that on a very technical level, right? That's not what we're interested in. We're interested in the art. Okay, so and I'm gonna ask you your opinions as well, but I'm gonna hold off for a moment. Let me kind of introduce this a little bit more before I ask you for your thoughts from your respective fields, or any fields which anything you want to bring up. So my at the same time as I was starting Russian language and literature classes, I was also in this class at my undergraduate, my freshman year of my undergraduate, and it was, I can't remember if the title of the class was something like Meet the Musician, like the 21st Century Musician. And, it was an interesting class for a lot of reasons. It was giving me a really good introduction to 20th and 21st century music. But one of the things that was a really big point in the class was, I guess the premise of the class in general was they brought in a bunch of outside musicians, and they performed small concerts for us, and we had to kind of figure out ways of talking about the music in an academic sense, but also kind of as though we were music critics. And one of the big points of the class was, should music, that's vocal music, right, that's in another language, should we translate? And actually, we might think the obvious answer, right, is don't translate it and have have it in its song in its original form, and have a translation given to the audience somehow. And that's certainly an option, but that was kind of the conclusion of our teacher, and that we kind of had to adopt and write about in the class as though it were our own opinion. Maybe not the world's greatest teaching, but that's another story. But the opinion we kind of had to defend was, in fact, we don't even want that. It's better if you don't know the language to just experience it. Now, I don't know that most people would agree with that. I don't think I agree with that, right? It would be let's say you're watching a foreign language film, and you're I'm just not going to put the subtitles on. I don't know French. It's a French film. I'm just not going to put the subtitles on. I'll just kind of get the atmosphere will wash over me, and I'll get something from it that way. Would you do that?
No.
Yeah. Yeah. But that was kind of an opinion we had to defend in the class. And at very least we had to defend that it's the original language should be preserved, because that's just what it is. That is what the work of art is, right? And you don't want to change what the work of art is. And again, we are supposed to defend that. If you don't know it, well, that's okay. What it actually is, what's being sung, it doesn't matter, because you can still feel it, right? Well, you'll certainly feel something, right? Think something if you listen to. We did this. We had a singer and a pianist come in, and they sang, and we didn't get a translation of what it was, and we had to write about it. Right, it was such an interesting experience, so I get passing grade, right? And well, yeah, you feel something, right? it's still a work of music, but I mean, I don't know what I'm. It's a work that's supposed to be communicating something through its words, right? So I'm obviously missing something. I mean, some of the messages, I don't know, maybe it's a song about going down the street to buy cucumbers. I don't know. It's totally made that off the top of my head. Maybe that's what the song is about. And I'm like, well, this kind of feels really bittersweet. Like, I mean, I know maybe it does. Maybe maybe if I knew what it was about buying cucumbers down the street, I wouldn't think it was so bittersweet. I don't know. So that was, where I kind of started. Ironically, though, at the same time, I'm starting to take Russian literature and language classes. But we'll touch on that in a second. But something that actually somewhat recently reminded me of that experience, which I kind of forgotten over the years and kind of buried. A friend of mine sent me a video of Shostakovich speaking. And there are a few videos of him talking. And my friend just thought it would be interesting. Hey, I know you love Shostakovich. Here's a video of him speaking. But what he actually happened to be saying, and this is not an interview I had heard before. It's a short thing, an excerpt from something, and I don't know what the whole thing is, or where to find it, or what the context is. But in this 2-minute clip, what he's saying in Russian, he says essentially, I went to go see Mussorgsky's opera, and I can't remember whether it was probably Boris Godunov or maybe Hovanshina, but probably Boris Godunov. So he says, I went to go see it in London, performed in London, Russian language, one of the most famous Russian, maybe the most famous Russian language opera. We went to go see it being performed in London, and he says, they sang it in Russian, but they're not Russians. So although they're using the right language, it's it says essentially the accent is wrong. You can tell it's not sung by Russians, even though they're literally using the right words. And he says, and because of that, it loses the effect that it's supposed to have. And if you're not going to have the effect that it's supposed to have, I would have rather heard them sing it in English and reproduce the effect as best they can in the language that the singers actually know. Now, I saw this interview, this clip of the interview. Again, I don't know the whole context or the whole interview, and I said, "Wow, it's too bad my professor back my freshman year at college didn't know this clip, because she'd be like, well, Shostakovich, one of the most important composers of the 20th century, you're wrong." This is a very different opinion. Here's Shostakovich saying, yeah, if you're not going to sing Russian and do it in a way that truly sounds authentically Russian, then just do it in English. It's not what I would have expected him to say, because that's generally, even if you don't hold the position, my experience in the musical world, generally, even if you don't hold the position that you shouldn't have any translation at all, which nobody does except for my professor my freshman year, people generally though say that you should maintain the original language. And I've experienced a few, I have a famous recording of the other really big Russian opera, Yevgeny Onegin, which I'll mention again in a moment, but it's a famous recording of it in English, and I've always thought it was kind of silly. But here's Shostakovich saying, if you're not going to do it well in Russian, just do it in English or whatever your native language is. So that's really interesting. So that's kind of why I've been thinking about this recently.
Can I interrupt you for a moment?
Sure.
So there's a few chats. So Kai says, sup Kai, by the way. Yeah, he cracked a joke that made me laugh. He said, Ben espousing super traditionalist Latin mass only position, as to regards to the professor insisting that you just
yeah. Yeah, just experience it.
Yeah, just experience. He also says Ben's Professor, rather. Yeah, okay. And then he says it's just all I want to do by Sheryl Crow, but not not in English. Yeah, and then the only other thing I wanted to add was this reminds me actually Nathan could relate. Nathan would relate more actually of J-rock bands like doing songs in English. It's just like
Yeah, I shouldn't do that typically.
it's just like why LARP as if.
I mean,
The worst part
ABBA,
is
right?
What is that?
I said ABBA was pretty successful singing in English, right?
Oh right.
But
So
it doesn't make sense when you can't understand what they're saying, but you know they're not speaking Japanese. Like
I
you
see.
could tell it's like English, but like you just like I don't know what's being said right now.
I mean, I do find it funny that was it like Sweden is where all the songwriters for pop music come from these days.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like people who don't. It's like, I mean, granted, like they learn English in school, but like it's not, you know, like their first language. But like they're better at it than we are apparently because we can't write pop music. You know, or pop lyrics anyway. So yeah,
The sad state of the empire.
yeah. Yeah. So my first question to myself, I want to ask, is, all right. So we have Shostakovich saying like, okay, if you're gonna do it, translate it, do it properly. Now is that different though when we have like a static art versus a reinterpreted art? Because he's referring to opera, right? And like something like opera, singing in general, theater, right? Where there's a text that exists, like a score, a script, right? That exists, but whenever it's performed, it is like re-brought to life, right? Is that different than say a movie, right, or a video game, right, where the work of art is fixed? So that's one question, right? If you're going to, is there a difference? And I honestly don't know the answer to that. I don't have a good answer. And so we have the idea, like, again, if we're gonna do it, we need to do it well. And what is Shostakovich like concerned with in that? He's concerned, like, we could be concerned, and he probably is, with the fact that like the Russian language is very different than English in the way it functions, and therefore the music is going to have, like, vocal music is going to have a different flow to it, right? They're going to accent things differently, and then if you try to put it in translation, it might have an awkward accent and a weird syllable, or it's not built to flow that in the same way. Especially for someone like Mussorgsky, who it's really interesting that Shostakovich is speaking specifically about Mussorgsky, because Mussorgsky was very, very interested in capturing the Russian language in music. He was very, very interested in, like, a lot of what he does is almost like not singing. It's almost more like musical speaking. In the vocal parts, he really wants it to sound like, contain the melodies that are just like inherent in Russian accent patterns and stress patterns and falling of pitches. Even though it's not a tonal language, but there are certain like ways that people speak like we do in English, right? What's interesting, what Shostakovich says, yeah, well, even if you like have the right words, you need to like fully embrace that effect, right, in order for it to work. And if you're not, then just do it in your own language and don't try to like mimic it. I kind of actually think that it's kind of persuasive. Although I'm not sure I'm absolutely persuaded, because I guess my experience with a lot of translations, like I mentioned, a translation of the sung in English version of Tchaikovsky's opera Yevgeny Onegin, sounds kind of silly to me. But on the other hand, maybe it's just that recording, right? It's not like an inherent property of the work if you translate it into English. And also some of the things that are like awkward in English are actually awkward in Russian too. Now, people sometimes don't do this intentionally. You intentionally avoid this. Like in the beginning of the opera, when we first meet our the heroine of the opera, Tatiana, she's describing herself and she's like, "Hey, I like to read a lot." Like literally, that's what she says in Russian. It's like "Я читаю много." It's like a first semester Russian sentence. I read a lot. Like almost can't get more basic than that, right?
Where is the library, like in Spanish, like "Donde está la biblioteca" type thing?
Yeah, it's literally I like to read a lot. Okay, now you can say this in English, and it may have like if you translate it totally literally, now it may have this effect like wow, that sounds super awkward, and like I never felt like it was awkward. I just heard it in Russian. Well, that's probably because if you don't know Russian, it's not going to sound like a Russian 101 sentence, but it actually is in the Russian, and I think that's intentional. I think it's supposed to be like, yeah, she's like likes to read a lot, but she's kind of socially awkward, and she's like, oh, what do I do? Oh, I like to read a lot, like maybe I read, but like I'm not gonna come out and like give a long, eloquent introduction to myself, I'm kind of shy. I think that's like the intended effect of the line. But like if you're used to thinking of an opera is always going to have these grand poetic lines, well, that's going to sound silly in English if you translate it literally. So you may choose as a translator not to do that and say, well, I am frequently found with a book or something like that. I don't know, making this up. So I don't know. I'm inclined actually to agree with Shostakovich that go for the effect if you're not going to do the original well. And that's a hard thing. Like, what does that actually mean to do well? That's a whole nother question, right? Like, I might speak Russian, but like I'm never gonna sound like never have a great Russian accent. So like, should I? Not that I sing, but like, if I sing Russian, would it be accurate enough? Probably. I don't know. So we get into that sort of question, like who is qualified to do it. So I don't know. It's a complicated question. And like I said,
this. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, and it may also have something to do with like reenacted, recreated art versus a static art. I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
No, I was just gonna say some of the concepts you're talking about reminds me of the good old. I'm done. Keep bringing this back to pop culture, but reminds me of the good old subbed versus dubbed debate, which is kind of like a lot of people like. For example, for me, it's like it's really unless the dub is written. Clearly rewritten, if that makes sense, not just translated. Unless it's clearly rewritten to take on the affect of English, most of the time it sounds ridiculous to me. Like it sounds absolutely absurd. So I hate reading while watching a movie. Like it's not an ideal situation. But I'd much rather read and hear the voice acting with the affect in Japanese or whatever. And it sounds less ridiculous when paired with the translation that way,
Yeah, and there's like, well, I'll delve into this in a second, but there's also like, obviously there's going to be a lot of things that are lost in translation, right? And like again, I'm not gonna get into like really technical details of like translating Russian. But I'll say, like, for example, Russian can be a very concise language. Like, a lot of places, the sense in Russian is kind of like, why? If I can say one word, why do I need to say 5 to express the same thing? So, for instance, if you watch, going back a couple of weeks, I talked about the film Andrei Rublev, right? And very early on, I think I mentioned, like, basically, the first real scene of the film, right? We have the 3 painting monks, they enter there's a big thunderstorm outside, and they enter a tavern for shelter from the storm. And at least in the version I have, right, so the word they say when I don't remember which monk it is. One of them says when they walk in the door, and there's a gesture kind of making fun of the ruling elite class in Russia in a kind of a slightly obscene way, and everyone pauses like, oh my goodness, there are three like monks in here, right? And they all stop, and so it's like this awkward like moment of tension and silence, and one of them just says "groza," which is thunderstorm. Okay, it's not like that's all you need to say, right? And you could do this in English, right? Kind of be like, this thunderstorm, right? But the translation, I don't remember exactly what it was, but it's like, hello, the fellows. There, can we take shelter inside? There's a thunderstorm outside. I'm like, you just added 3 sentences to like a one word in Russian.
Yeah.
Okay. Now the Russian like has, it's very condensed, right? It's thunderstorm. Right? They know there's a thunderstorm outside. Like you don't need to say there's a thunderstorm outside. So, if you read the translation, you're gonna get the impression this is a much more formal sort of like address than it actually is. It's not very. It's very informal, right? It's like, hey, can we take I don't need to say can we take shelter because there's a thunderstorm outside. It's like thunderstorm, right? And everyone understands what that means. It's not that like formal.
We have a chat actually on Rumble, and I want to interject especially for that because we always want to encourage people to be chatting on Rumble. It's not connected to the whole chat system, unfortunately, so you never see it on the screen. But I think I caught this one in time. So Poppet's Corner says, "How about translations in silent movies? Do they count with this topic? Big fan of the show. Thanks, guys." Yo, big fan of the show. You should be commenting way more often for sure. Love to see it. Thank you, Poppet's Corner. And by the way, join our Discord if you're on there already. But yeah, what do you think, Ben?
I'm not like. What do you mean by translation in silent film? Like,
so I think because there's subtitles.
Yeah.
Oh. So it actually adds like an interesting complication because there's no affect to hear. There's no like like. The words could be changed without any the viewer having any connection to what was actually intended to be said or something like that.
Are there that many silent films that like have dialogue like that? Like I know that like the silent films that I'm familiar with, like really early things, they tend to have like text that kind of clarifies the scene and like almost in a narrator sort of way, like, and then we move. And then the characters like got on a train or something like that. I'm not like, is that what you're referring to? Or are you referring to like actual dialogue? I'm not really familiar with that.
Respond, Poppet's Corner. Yeah, I've seen some dialogue occasionally, but it's like teeny tiny plates like here. Like it's a lot of times it's like, oh no, or something like some like if we're talking about like really old stuff like that.
Okay, yeah, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I think that's kind of like inherent, though, like to that. You might call that the native form of the art, though, because it's what the director intended to put there, presumably, right?
Yeah.
So it's not really. It's a translation, but like it's a translation that like from nothing. So like it is what is there, right? Like it's not trying to recreate something that was expressed in another medium.
It's possible that, like, say that there's no exact. I know this is very we're getting to very like sort of like 1% chance type things here, but I guess it's possible that some sort of short like oh no or something like that, some short phrase. There could be like a translation for it in the language, but it might have like there might not be like I guess you'll never get the exact connotation, but it might be like different enough maybe or something like that. I don't know. Maybe it's a really tiny chance of that, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. So, I guess if we just move on then to, so we've already kind of like briefly talked about like the philosophical, like should we do it, right? Sort of. I mean, I don't have a real good answer, like 100% of the time, but on the assumption that we are going to do it, right? We are going to at least, whether we're going to like literally translate it within the work, like now they're singing in English instead of in German, or whether we're going to at least like put subtitles in there, right, or dub the film or put subtitles in. Assuming that we are going to do it, right? And then we have the question of, like, how do we do it, right? And again, avoiding like technical questions. There's a lot of philosophical things to think about. I mentioned Yevgeny Onegin already as an opera, but Yevgeny Onegin is actually a long narrative poem by Pushkin, and we could talk. I could go on for a long time about the relationship between the poem and the opera. That's another episode. But so Pushkin, right? He's kind of like regarded as the Russian language Shakespeare, and this is kind of his like most important, maybe his most important work, long poetic work. And my first like real encounter with like the philosophical questions of translation versus the technical concerns was when I read Evgeny Onegin in a class, I think my sophomore year of college. And the question is, what translation to be reading? This is a class that was in English. And it's a really, really beautiful poem, but it's impossible to translate. And this is like our first day of class. We had like 16 different translations of the opening stanza to compare, and they're all radically different. And so you could go like the famous approach of Nabokov, right? Famous as an author of things like Lolita, and he translates it. And his translation is famous in that he tries to be as literal as humanly possible. So it's very precise. You know exactly what Pushkin said originally.
Right.
But it also has like 400 pages of footnotes. Because the common, retort or response to Nabokov's translation is that he takes out all of the poetry from the poem and puts it all in the footnotes. If you actually want to if you want to know literally what is said in like the most exact way humanly possible, right? You read the translation. But if you actually want to understand any of like what is happening linguistically and like artistically in it, that you cannot get from a very literal translation, you have to read the 400 pages of footnotes. Okay, so that's one approach, right? Take out all the poetry and be as precise as possible. And well, okay, now I know what is literally said, but like I missed the art, right? We can substitute art for poetry, perhaps. So that's one option. Maybe the other option, which is, well, we'll kind of forget the language itself and like what is literally said, but we'll go for the effect. And there are a million gradations in between that, right? Like I said, my day one of this class was here are 16 different translations of the opening stanza. And the opening stanza is quite hard to translate. I don't know how to do it. I mean, I know what it means. I can read it in Russian, right? But trying to convey that, I tend to be a more literal, like I've done some translation of Russian poetry. A lot of it's on my Facebook page, ironically, from a couple of years ago. But I tend to be more literal, but like try to take liberties sometimes, like make it sound like there's actually some poetry that's actually there. But it's very hard. It's very hard to do that. And we know how difficult interpreting poetry is in our own language, right? Throw then into a translated work, and when I'm translating a work, whether it's poetry or not, right, I'm in some sense already interpreting it and giving my interpretation, unless I'm going to be as literal as humanly possible, right? Even then, it's still going to be some sense of like my interpretation of the work is going to color what I'm doing. So you might say, well, it's great. If you're going to do it, translate, you may as well do it well. But there's a philosophical question of what that means, right? Do we try primarily to convey the effect of the original, or do we try to make it as comprehensible as possible? And I'm not going to give you like a 16 version of the opening stanza of Beginning on Yegan example, but I thought I'd give an example. I'm not actually sure how different these are, but we're going to try this. Two translations of my favorite passages from Anna Karenina. Now, we have... Yeah.
Can I interrupt before you do that, because there's more chats on Rumble here, so
Sure.
make sure we address them. So Papa's Corner says, fellow musician, podcaster, now filmmaker here. Just want to say again, great insights on all things media. Definitely will join the Discord. Thanks, Irving, Ben, and Nathan. Super awesome.
Thank you.
He also says,
Thank you.
This can be applied to the Passion of Joan of Arc. The whole dialogue was taken from her court case, like the movie, The Passion of Joan of Arc, I think is what he's referring to.
I don't know that.
Yeah. So that is interesting. That is interesting.
All right. So the most famous passage from Anna Karenina is the very opening, but we'll skip that. And we have two versions. This first one's from 1939, I believe, and I honestly. It's a really old book. I think it's probably from 1939, and I don't even remember who the translators are, and it's not even listed on here, and so that's not good. So, credit to them, whoever they are. The introduction is by Thomas Mann. But I do know that this is, I don't know. It's a pretty. I think I recall this being a pretty well known version from that era, and we're going to contrast it then with this version, which is by Pevier and Volhansky, husband and wife team that translate everything in Russian. They're kind of the contemporary standard for translating pretty much everything in Russian. They're like just your go-to in like a contemporary class. All right, so I'm just going to read this passage. It's one paragraph long, and we're just going to see how these translators from about 70 years apart, give or take, handled this passage. We're not going to read the Russian, because then I'd have to translate it, and we'd have to add that in too. We'll just give brief context, so you know what's happening very briefly. This is towards the beginning of the novel, and this does not involve Anna Karenina at all. It's about the two characters who are kind of the foil to her. We have Levin, who is kind of he's in love with this young lady named Kitty. Am I frozen? I think I was frozen for a second.
Yeah.
Okay. So Levin is in love with this young lady named Kitty, and he finds out that he's like a champion ice skater. And he finds out that she's gone down to the rink to go ice skating. So he's like, I'm going to go down to the rink and try to talk to her. Okay. So I'll just read the paragraph. So we'll start with the older version. I just want to, again, I just picked this passage like 5 minutes before we started. I asked my co-hosts whether they preferred Anna Karenina or War and Peace, or is that what options I gave? I don't know. Yeah. Something like that. I could pull out options from anything else. I went with this. So I don't know how different they are, but we'll just take this as an example. Okay. So he sees her, right? And so we get translation number 1. He knew that she was there by the rapture and the terror that seized on his heart. He was standing, talking to a lady at the opposite end of the ground. There was apparently nothing striking either in her dress or her attitude. But for Levin, she was as easy to find in that crowd as a rose among nettles. Everything was made bright by her. She was the smile that shed light on all around her. Is it possible I can go over there on the ice, go up to her, he thought? The place where she stood seemed to him a holy shrine, unapproachable, and there was one moment where he was almost retreating, so overwhelmed was he with terror. He had to make an effort to master himself, and to remind himself that people of all sorts were moving about her, and that he too might come there to escape. He walked down, for a long while avoiding looking at her as at the sun, but seeing her as one does the sun without looking. One of my favorite passages in Russian literature. Alright, and our more modern translation. We'll just see how different this is. Again, I don't know. We'll see. He knew she was there by the joy and fear that overwhelmed his heart. She stood at the other end of the rink, talking to a lady. There seemed to be nothing very special in her dress, nor in her pose, but for Levin, she was as easy to recognize in that crowd as a rose among nettles. Everything was lit up by her. It was the smile that brightened everything around. Can I really step down there on the ice and go over to her? He thought. The place where she stood seemed to him unapproachably holy, and there was a moment when he almost went away. He was so filled with awe. Making an effort, he reasoned that all sorts of people were walking near her, and that he might come to skate there himself. He stepped down, trying not to look long at her, as if she were the sun, yet he saw her like the sun, even without looking. Alright, so, I don't know. I'll let you guys...
pretty different, actually. Yeah, like pretty darn different. The other translation actually had... I don't know, so you're saying the older translation is the more direct translation, right? Or...
I don't know about that.
Okay.
The line, I know the passage, but the only line I really tell you exactly in Russian is the very last one, about avoiding looking at the sun, but seeing her like one sees the sun, even without attempting to look at it. Gotcha.
Yeah, the second one read more naturally, for sure, and the first one seemed more... like it seemed like it sounded to my ears like it would have been more one-to-one with potentially the writing.
Yeah. Any thoughts, Nathan, or anyone else in the comments?
Well, okay. Thoughts a little bit from the past, a little bit, because I've gone down this the Passion of Joan of Arc rabbit hole now.
Okay.
So it is a silent film with dialogue, and I was looking at like a little clip of it, and it looks like they have like sort of their mouths will be moving.
Silent film. Yeah, I didn't even process that. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. So their mouths will be moving. There's no sound of a voice or anything like that, and then like a sort of splice of like text will appear, but the text will be like, it won't be like overlaid like modern subtitles, right? It'll be like a black sort of screen with like the text that was just said, and then it'll go back to the video, if that makes sense. It's easier to understand if you just watch a little bit, but it's interesting. Cool.
Yeah, sounds like an interesting film. Yeah.
I do see the definitely like the predicament of translations between languages, and like, okay, like there are so many methodologies you can go by, to try to achieve a result.
Yeah. I would say, just going by my knowledge of reading Tolstoy in Russian, the first is probably closer to what Tolstoy is actually writing, right? Like it's probably more one-to-one, although I don't know that 100% certainty. This particular passage, but it sounds to me more one-to-one.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas the second feels more like the way someone would write it if they're writing a novel now in English. But we also there's also a whole aspect of time, right? Like obviously languages and formality and customs change over time, right? This is not 18 Russian of 2024 is not the same Russian of the 1880s, right? Even if the words are same, we talk differently than we talk in America, the United States in 1880, right? So there's that element too. There's the time element we have. One is addressing.
Do you think there should be translations that are updated for time differences? Like, should we have say even like English to English? Should we have modern Shakespeare translations?
Yeah, I always find that funny where we have the a no fear Shakespeare where it's modern translation where it really Shakespeare almost never needs to be translated. Sometimes it's helpful to know what this word or that word meant, right? Like a dictionary sort of thing. Well, that's different than saying to be or not to be. That is the question, and translating that as I wonder whether it would be good to be alive or dead. I don't think that's literally what no Shakespeare does, but it's probably something like that. No, that's not translating. That's just paraphrasing it.
Right. Yeah. I will say, I feel like Shakespeare needs more of an a glossary or encyclopedia, mostly for references that are like historical references or idioms that don't make sense anymore.
Yeah, the Folger Shakespeare library, the side by side, it has the not the No Fear Shakespeare side by side where it's original and then translation on the other page. It's original and then almost notes on the other side.
Right.
I prefer that. I can read the original and I don't have a translation, but if I'm stuck on what the word or this word or this meant, maybe it means a word I've never seen before, or maybe it's a word that we use now but has a completely different sense than it did in 1570, whatever. Is it 16 something? Remember, late 1500s, early 1600s, right? I prefer that, having an explanation than a translation.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm just gonna say the thing that struck me the most is the thing that's the most different in these two is the line. Well, I like the difference between is it possible that I can go over there and can I really step down there? Those are just very different in modern language, right?
Yeah.
This is self-talk, right? And it's kind of interesting. I wouldn't talk to myself today. Is it possible that I could really go and do that? And say, can I do that? Can I really do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing that actually I thought was most different and subtly different but interesting is the earlier translation being the place where she stood seemed to him a holy shrine, unapproachable, versus the place where she stood seemed to him unapproachably holy.
Yeah, there's more detail in the one.
Yeah,
Straight up.
And so I honestly I have I'll take me a moment to pull out the right Russian text. I have all my Russian books right down here. I could look at what the original Russian is, but they're it's a subtle difference to be sure, but different nonetheless, right? That was the line that stuck out the most to me. And again, I don't know off the top of my head what the original Russian says, but there's obviously something there. It's some different, way of capturing what is being expressed by Tolstoy. So I don't know. Again, I don't really have any answers, but so on one hand we have should we do it, right? And I think yes, right. Just trying to completely ignore linguistic differences, I don't think is the answer. I don't want to, I don't want to watch a French film in French and not have subtitles, right? And I'll just figure out what's happening. I can see what's going on, right? That'll be enough. Yeah, that's not how I want to watch a film, right? And the same way, it's not really how I want to listen to a piece of music. But we do have does it change for the sort of medium of the art, right? Do we need to attempt to do it well? Do we want to capture all of these we want to prioritize capturing the effect or the literal meaning of it, right? And if we're going to do it, like, we got to wrestle with all these philosophical questions in addition to all these technical questions that aren't really relevant, that, like, we don't need to delve into now. Like I said, you can spend your life trying to figure out how to accurately translate Russian, right? And obviously any other language out there. And I am really curious if there's a difference between an art that is always being reinterpreted, like a play or an opera or a song, versus, like, if you are a French director, in your film, if you want subtitles, right, and translated subtitles, maybe you want to translate it yourself and, like, have that set for eternity, right? That's the translation I want of these lines. If you know English, or you trust somebody who can do it for you. I don't know if there's a difference between, like, the kind of approach you take in those cases or not. So no answers, but things I've been thinking about. I welcome any thoughts from you guys or anyone in the audience.
Yeah, that's made me think. I feel like I haven't really thought about any of this when it comes to video games, which is super weird because I feel like this is especially important where video games are so international. Like there are so like I played so many games where I don't even know where they're coming from. And I don't even think about the fact that this was not originally in English. Specifically, there's tons of European and Japanese games specifically that tons of like AAA studios are from there, and they release their games for English speaking audiences 90% of the time. So, but I never even noticed like mistranslations. That was interesting. I guess because they have their good translators and everything's everything's solved. And I suppose I don't too often play dialogue heavy games, although I think I should, but I don't too often. I think I have a totally different experience when it comes to music, where, like everyone was saying with J-Rock, it's like, yeah, definitely don't try translating. Or you could if it works out, but usually it just doesn't. I think because typically the person who's translating is not like someone who's well versed in both languages. It's typically someone who's well versed in the original language and then decided, oh, let me just throw in some English lyrics or whatever. And even I've noticed on subtitles where you think like, okay, well, these subtitles are probably not created by the original lyricist, probably created by some translator or something like that. But there are tons and tons of Japanese songs where the translated lyrics literally are like grammatically incorrect, or they don't make sense. I'm like, I don't even know what you're trying to say here. That maybe have to do with the fact that the language is so different. So maybe certain like idioms and things like that, like they just really do not like make any sense in English. Yeah, it's interesting.
But when you listen to J-pop, do you want to know what the translation is, or you just like, yeah, I'll let it wash over me?
Well, in my, I think preferably it would be good if I knew what they were saying, but it's okay that I don't. I guess like I'm fine with the fact that it sounds fine, and the voice becomes another one of the other instruments essentially for me, more or less.
So you would have gotten an A in my freshman class.
Well, I would have preferred to know what they were saying, especially in certain songs. Like, well, actually, I don't know. Actually, this is a good question because we did talk about this before. How I was talking about certain. I think I brought up like Paramore as an example of certain bands where you're listening to them and you're like, dang, like these lyrics aren't really. They're not really it, It may be better if they were singing a foreign language and I could just listen to the sound. So maybe it depends on the song. Like I could probably guess like if it's like a power metal song, I don't need the lyrics. It's okay. I don't really need that, But if it's like some classic rock type thing, okay, I'm more down with the lyrics, So probably just depends.
So. One thing I wrote down on the top of my my notes for this, I just wrote case by case basis ? So there you go.
Yeah.
Kai says, feels like there's a new game translation controversy on the weekly. Dang, okay.
I'm not. I'm not in
That's
this
cool.
world. I don't know.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm. I mean, I can imagine that being the case. I know some guy um, who I've worked with, but his main job is in game development for a company. It's based in Russia, but like they're producing. I don't remember. He's given me names of games that he's producing. They're like English language games, you know. So
Yeah.
obviously, people outside of the United States are making English language games.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are also localization companies that'll you can pay to translate your game for you, and it's like a standardized like file format for that kind of stuff and whatnot. And there's some games that open source it too, or like take in like community contributions. So like I don't know if you're a speaker. I say you speak Russian, right? But you're playing a game that's in English. It doesn't have Russian translation, and you're playing it, but you also know English, and you maybe decide, hey, let me make it accessible to other Russian-speaking people and provide some translations for them. So,
Yeah,
Right.
interesting.
Kai says a lot of it is politics, censorship, people who want the game to be more based or woke, etc. In translation. Okay, interesting.
Well,
I mean, you
guess
can't really change a lot of meetings, with translation, I guess. But I don't know.
Oh,
it's
I
weird
can see
that
the
this would be a
censorship
thing.
angle for sure. Yeah, like you're for this audience, censor it so it sounds more like this. I guess
I see.
might be like the demands. That's interesting. But from the film perspective, I've watched so many films not in English or with sections not in English, and just for like filmmaking, I really think case by case is really the thing, for sure. Because if I'm watching a documentary, it's probably more important that you not give me. It's probably well, that might be case by case too. Now that I think of it, it might even be scene by scene, even. But if it's critical what the exact idea someone's trying to say, to get across to the viewer, you probably should be more literal. Probably don't even translate the idioms out of one culture to another or something like that. Whereas, like, in most cases, I would say, I think that more, unless it is somehow intelligible for the direct translation to reach the English ears, I actually rather you rewrite it. And in most cases, I'm not saying all cases, and it actually might be scene by scene type of thing too, and movie by movie type of thing. Just because, it's just like you're again presenting something that we don't understand. Like you're actually not the translation isn't doing like the whole work, but you can't actually capture the whole work of the original language. It's not possible. There's actually there's a barrier that is uncrossable. Actually, which I think is okay. Once you accept that, you go, okay, well, now what does the filmmaker wish my English ears to hear? If it were to be translated, that's the way I'd put it. But mostly, I hate reading while watching a film because my eyes are not doing the thing they're supposed to do. They're literally very focused a lot on the words at the bottom. I find myself in my head being like, I want to read this fast because this frame is super interesting, and then I'm already kind of out of the space. But I've some of my favorite films are still subtitled foreign films, so highly situational, ordeal.
Yeah. Like I said, that's what I wrote at the top of my notes. Case by case basis ? So.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's all of my kind of questions. Not really answers. I don't think I give any answers at all. So all the philosophical questions I came up with. So at very least, something to think about a little bit if you're into any of these kinds of arts that revolve around language in some fashion, or at least sometimes, right? Music doesn't always revolve around language, but sometimes it does with vocal music. So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe just interesting questions to think about. And even if you're not like basing it directly yourself, like in terms of creating it, you probably consume some art in some form that it involves translation. And I don't know, maybe just something to think about when you consume that art next time. But yeah, hopefully it was at least somewhat interesting or thought provoking. That's all I have.
Sweet, sweet. I liked it. Something a lot deeper than I've thought about the subject for sure.
For sure,
All right.
same here.
Yeah. All right. Next, we've got arguing with Reddit, and I'll just hop right into it. See you on the other side of the transition. Here we go.
Mixed Media Movies.
And welcome back to Mixed Media. This is our Arguing with Reddit segment. Ben just did an awesome segment on translations and art. Highly recommend that you check that out in the section before this. And check out our entire awesome, dense catalog of very varied topics, to say the least, if you're interested in anything art-related or music, movies, and gaming. But before I play some Arguing with Reddit, we should reintroduce ourselves. So my name is Irving Nestor. I'm a filmmaker and media entrepreneur. I own a company called Ariella based out of Mount Carmel, Pennsylvania.
Hi, my name is Ben Costello. I'm a flute player and media composer.
And my name is Nathan Nestor. I'm a 3D modeler and video game developer.
Sweet. All right, the first one I'll pull here. I'll pull Nathan's first. Oh, he just he just went away. Okay, I'll pull mine first. I'll put mine first here. And so if you're unfamiliar with Arguing with Reddit, what we do is we... I was about to pull yours first, Nathan, but I'll do mine first.
So, okay, either way.
Yeah, I already copied the link in. It's okay. If you're unfamiliar with Arguing with Reddit, what we do is we react. It's one of our turns every week, and we react to hot takes from Reddit that our co-hosts have found us. And it's really that simple. So I'm going to be reacting to hot takes about film here. So this one's from me. I found it, and I only read the title. So here we go. Says, why is it so hard to find a good colorist? And the description here says, editor and director here. I've worked on multiple high-end jobs this month as an editor. These are commercials for national brands, so these are not jobs for colorists still learning the basics. And yet, on every single job, I've had to call out basic issues with consistency, skin tones changing, black levels, changing hues in a branded animation character that has a distinctive fur color. On other jobs, the colorist has so manipulated the curves, crushed the skin tones, that the in-camera LUT still looks better. That's an insult that's a good insult. On one job, a scene with two black people had their skin tones practically orange. I never thought I would see a lack of basic technical ability at this level, and it's soul-crushing to see the color science of an RE camera, which renders skin tones beautifully, that it does, squandered by a bad grade, which is, yeah. Colors, what's the deal? It's maddening. Okay, this guy's mad. Because as far as I can tell, mediocre colorists are getting hired for high-end jobs merely because they did the last one. Colorists accumulate jobs on their reel that are increasingly disconnected from the actual level of ability, and because good color can be subjective... well, you seem to have an objective complaint. So... no one ever gets called out enough to not get hired again. Agencies, not DPs, are now sitting in on color sessions, so no one with a good eye is supervising the work. Has everyone witnessed similar situations? Okay, so I'm not, like, in the industry like that, so, like, I couldn't tell you, like, you know, the trends, but I do color a lot, and I've come to really enjoy color. I still consider myself like a pro-am colorist, like, you know, like I'm somewhere in between. Like, I wouldn't, if someone wanted me to grade, you know, a film with a budget over like $300,000, I would have to like do a lot of practice to convince myself that I'm actually capable of doing something like that with the footage coming from, you know, those super high-end cameras for that. So that's where I'm at as a colorist, but I also love the hell out of it. You know, I love watching for color grading, even in commercials. So I do pay attention to this stuff because I'm crazy. I just love doing it very much, coming up with all kinds of crazy ways to tell a story through color. And color is like practically for most films, it's like half of the mood of every shot is just like what the grade looks like, But in any case, so why do they suck, apparently? So apparently the trend is that they're sucking. I would say so. There's a few things I've noticed in the color grading space. I think, oddly enough, I don't know why this is, but at least the way it appears on social media and on YouTube is that color grading is portrayed as like a get rich quick industry. Now I don't know why. Like there's nothing about it that really seems like that to me. It seems like being an editor. Like it's you could do this job at home, which is awesome. But other than that, it's like every other thing. You need to put in the hard work. You need to have the actual technical ability and to be extremely knowledgeable. And color science is hard. It's it's really no joke. It's not those who were doing this in chemical baths, back in the day, those people were crazy. So, doing it digital is hard enough. That being said, I think a lot of my monitor, this monitor right here, that has been my main color grading monitor for a very long time. And this monitor, I don't remember how much I paid for it. It's not a color grading monitor. This is a gaming monitor, right? But what I did was I bought a gaming monitor because I was running on a very tight budget, super tight budget, and I'm glad it still works. But I knew that with some color correction, and if I'm mostly delivering in Rec 709, which is what most things that aren't going in a theater or some other more professional presentation, you're going to be finishing in Rec 709. You're making these things for Rec 709. If I'm going to be doing that, I need a monitor that fills the Rec 709 space somewhat accurately, and then I can get it's not nearby right now, I can get a little color corrector module, put it on my monitor, and take the original calibration and basically double the value of my monitor by just correcting it myself, if that makes sense. What I'm trying to say, though, is that this monitor still sucks. It's still, not good, at all. The black levels are terrible, there's a lot of problems with this monitor. But my grades, if I were to say so myself, my grades are still pretty darn good. And why is that? That's because I think a lot of people, they focus so much on how it looks, the way that the color grading space is so focused on what monitor to get. And I'm not trying to say it doesn't matter. Get the best monitor you can afford. Absolutely, because that's the product. You're showing yourself the product before you deliver it. That's very, very important. So I'm not one of those people who are it doesn't matter what gear you get. It does matter. I'm just trying to say that they're not good enough for their gear. Right? They're just not good enough for their gear. They haven't reached the level where they can actually extract value out of their monitor, and they think because to their eyes, in some vague notion that they can't actually vocalize, that it looks good. Now, as a director, as someone who directs things, if you can't vocalize why you think something is a good idea, this is why I love film, in particular, because it's where a lot of the stupid art speak kind of gets smacked. It's you actually have to explain to me why, because I'm not you and I don't know how to do what you do. I don't. So you're gonna have to be able to translate why you're doing it to me, and I could look at it and say that looks good, but I actually don't even want to trust my impression because you're the expert. Right? That's how a director should be, right? And so I want you to be able to vocalize. Why are you making XYZ decisions? So I suspect, I don't know, that a lot of people, not just in color, but in a lot of departments where things have been portrayed as a get-rich-quick scheme or something like this, people just kind of say, if it's artsy in some way, shape, or form, if it's different enough, then it's passable. It's workable. Where that does not work. the way you grade, if you know what you're doing, is you grade via objective data. Like literally, like you have graphs and everything. Like, if you look at me while I'm grading, my second monitor is just all a bunch of graphs and vectors and all this kind of stuff, and my first monitor has the picture, usually very small, actually smaller than when I'm editing. Like the actual frame is like, is like just up in the corner there. And recently, I just started using my tablet as a video feed monitor, but that's just a Rec 709 feed, and I've been using that as a confidence monitor to have the whole thing blown up while I'm grading. But most of my grading time, I haven't had that. So how is that happening? It's because when I look at the graph, I actually understand it, right? And that took a long time. Like, and intuition is like very hard. Like, it just practice, like a lot of practice. Watching people do it, watching what techniques they're using, and like not going like, well, do I really have to know what Rec 709 means, or like Rec 2020, or like whatever? Like, do I have to know what these things? No, you actually do. Like, you actually do need to know what they mean, or else you're going to absolutely destroy everything. And one thing I see here that really sticks out to me, that I've seen on commercials and a lot of other places, is bad skin tones. This is like basic. Like, I could explain to you how to make sure your skin tones look good in like, as long as the footage is not like demented, right? Like, as long as you're not like taking footage from, like, if you're taking footage from an iPhone, it's a lot harder, right? But if you're taking footage from like anything remotely like video oriented these days, that was made post, I don't know, 2018 or something, you're likely getting not bad skin tones out of the box. And from there, you can make your corrections not too bad. Resolve is adding so many tools for skin tone. It's just crazy that I see this on TV, bad skin tones that are like green or like, and clearly unintentional, or like purple, or like just like have these weird splotchy bits because they push the grade too hard. And I've seen that, and I've been like, dang, why don't I get a job? why don't they let these people hire me? These people probably got paid like obscene amounts of money to just mess it up. But it's interesting hearing the behind the scenes from this guy who's apparently noticed that in the commercial space as well. But I don't know exactly why. I'm just kind of BSing what I've seen from online stuff. I don't know how representative that is of what's happening in the industry or not. But if you'd like to hire me, you can look up my name. You can search my name, or you can search my company, Ariella, and I would love to color grade for you. I enjoy the heck out of it. I can send you a whole bunch of samples there. So there's a plug. I just want to give a glance over some of these things. So apparently people complaining about industry people filling in instead of DPs, which is absolutely unacceptable. The DP should be involved in the color grade, because the DP is the only one who knew what the intended palette was supposed to be, right? When he shot the thing, and how he was deficient in shooting it, or how he wished to shape everything in post, how he imagined everything would be shaped, in post. So the DP has to be in on these things. As a DP, you destroy my footage, I'm coming after you. Like, I'm coming after you. Because it makes the DP look horrible. So I'm surprised DPs aren't like tearing down the door to be in on the grade session, because that's their name on that thing. So
who's being referred to by agencies? Like, what does that mean?
Oh, like commercial, ad agencies. Usually middlemen for like whatever company. So Pepsi's like calls up agency 205, and they hire the crew. They come up with a concept sometimes. Sometimes they hire the writers to come up with a concept. Sometimes the concepts are bid out, whatever. And they take care of all the admin for that. And they probably know nothing. So
I will say it is rare indeed that I find a good commercial.
Oh, commercials, that would make a good mixed media topic. Commercials have gone in the absolute toilet. Like, wow. Like, you guys do not get any conversions from these commercials. unless it's like something like that has like some addictive component. That's what I've noticed. The only ads that ever like seem to be around for a long time are ones where like it's like selling something addictive, or like the ad itself is like addictive, in some way, shape, or form. So yeah, commercials are trash. But anyway, we're far from the days of Technicolor, that's for sure. All right, I'll pick this next one from you, Nathan.
All right, so this one is from r/movies. It says, "What movie spectacularly failed to capitalize on their premise?" And in this case, I actually did not read the description, but I don't know. I just completely forgot that was a thing. It looks like he mentions Cocaine Bear as a. He says it was so hilarious and perfect. Blah blah. Okay, he said he was ready for ridiculousness. I did not get what he was expecting. Wait, you said he didn't necessarily dislike the movie, but the movie, I imagine in his head, was much cooler. Didn't you just say he was hilarious and perfect? Okay, I don't know, but
maybe the concept was hilarious and perfect. I don't know. I don't know what the person.
Oh, the trailer. Okay, yeah, you're right. Yeah, so okay, yeah, that is the question being asked. What movie spectacularly failed to capitalize on the premise?
So I'm bad. I'm always bad at pulling examples, of anything just off the top of my head. So I immediately pull open my letterbox to kind of look at give myself some refreshers of stuff. Oh yeah, I'm seeing. Yeah, there are. Well, we're not going to go into the Star Wars thing.
I was about to say. I mean, pretty much almost every Disney Star Wars thing except for Andor.
Yeah. We're going to skip over Star Wars because that's a rant I've given many times, and Ben has probably also doubled up on, so we'll put that aside for now. Let's see here. Here's a good one. I would not have come up with this one off the top of my head. There's El Camino, which was a Breaking Bad spin-off movie. And it was okay. Now, Breaking Bad is my favorite TV show of all time. Pretty sure that's true. Yeah, I think that is true. If it was on Letterboxd, which I don't think it is, I'd give it a 5 out of 5 for sure. One of the greatest shows ever written, particularly spectacular in its writing. And that's a show I've been thinking about doing for a long time, but it requires a lot of respect. So, any case, there's a spin-off movie, but done by the same cast and crew, or, same above the line crew, by and large, called El Camino, which featured Jesse, the character Jesse, whose the actor's name is Aaron Paul, and featured a segment featured him basically running away to Alaska. Spoiler. And he's literally in a Camino, the car, and he's, there's a double entendre in the title anyway. And it just, the premise is so awesome because the character is at the end of the arc, but there's still tension left from the show because we don't know what happens to him, right? And the actors involved on the cast list, I mean, all the actors in Breaking Bad are awesome, but these are people we didn't get to see enough of a lot of times in the main show because although they were banging on 10 in every scene they were in, they just didn't have a huge part, right? They fit perfectly, but, didn't have, like, the most screen time. So this would be, like, Todd, played by Jesse Plemons, who was so awesome at Todd in the original Breaking Bad. We got Charles Baker as Skinny Pete, Matt Jones as Badger, so on and so forth. And just the entire premise, awesome premise, but it felt like no one cared. It's the weirdest feeling, like, in execution, where it's like, man, that concept is literally perfect. Like, spin-off movies, you don't have to make them. But this one, the moment you pitched it, make it. Make that thing. That needs to be a movie. but it just felt like the writing seemed to be kind of there, but like every other part, like the cinematography, the acting, everything else felt like everyone was kind of over it, if that makes sense, and they were kind of here for their last paycheck. Everyone kind of phoned it in, which is kind of a sad state of that movie. Still decent, if you're bored, still go to watch, but not as great as the show. Let's see what else might be on here that might be noteworthy. Let's see. Oh, what's that film? The Nolan film? Tenet. Tenet. Have you guys seen Tenet?
I haven't, but I was about to fill that name in for you because I know how you feel about it. So,
really interesting concept that basically revolves around non-causality in film, which is a cool concept and a cool experiment, but not to waste 3 hours on gesticulating about nothing, basically. Very pointless movie, not just because it is literally pointless, by its non-causality, which isn't, I guess, it's vaguely interesting if you made it a short film, not even a feature film. But the premise was super cool because we were promised a Nolan's James Bond, right? And now I'm like, this is why he's not getting a James Bond film ever. So it's just bruh, everything was subservient to the non-causality of it. Even the writing, the lines were so they landed so bad so often. The main actor, I think he did okay with what he was given, but I think he just was not convinced in him at all. The best thing I remember from that film is what's his face's performance, Robert Pattinson of Twilight fame. Robert Pattinson is actually a top tier actor, putting Twilight aside. And I really love his performances, and he killed his side character for some odd reason, for no reason at all. He just murdered his side character and made it super awesome. Had really weird tics and stuff I would not have thought of to give that character, but it was awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's probably, if I kept going, there's more Star Wars that I had forgot about. I'm not going to talk about it. There's plenty of Star Wars fails.
Especially all of the shows, except for Andor.
Right.
we have another one. We have I mentioned the Acolyte a couple of weeks ago. We have that coming out on a week from today. Actually, come out during our show, so I will miss the premiere for our show. They decided they're going to put it on 9 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday for some reason. They're really pushing it hard right now. The advertising, they've been putting out ads all over the place. So yeah. We'll see how that goes. The Rashomon in space.
Forgot about that comparison.
I mean, literally that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be murder of a Jedi from multiple perspectives. So
interesting. Another shout out as I'm scrolling through here that's definitely worth noting, because this is a highly concept film. This is Boyhood. I don't know if you guys remember that film when it was coming out. It was a huge deal.
I know all the times you've talked about it.
Oh, I've talked about it before?
Well, I don't know, you haven't done a show on it, but you've certainly mentioned it enough. That,
okay.
Over 2 years, we've talked about so many things.
Exactly.
More than 2 years now.
For those who don't know, the concept is that they made a film with a child actor as he was growing up, and it was a Bill Dung's Roman, so it's yeah, and his acting, he didn't grow up to be a good actor, or maybe he just didn't care. That's tough. He turns 12, and you're like action, and he's just I don't want to be here anymore. But we've been doing this for 10 years. We've been doing this for 10 years. We can't stop now. We got to go until you're 18. It's like...
Yes, that's the danger of the premise, right?
It's like, guys, like,
that is very risky. You have to have like commitment by like many people for. It looks like it was an 11-year project, so that's crazy.
And it's like not even shot that well, and the story's actually not even that interesting. I don't even remember what happens. So like, it's just like it won Oscars though. It won Oscars. So for whatever that's worth, because the concept was too spectacular, I think. Oh boy. But yeah, I would call that spectacularly failing to capitalize on their premise, that's for sure. I think that fits that pretty well. Okay. This last one is from Ben, if you want to explain.
Yeah, I don't think it's that much more than the title. It's any remakes that were better than the original movie. They give some examples of things that were not better than, where remakes are not better than the original. They mention Don't Tell Mom, The Babysitter's Dead, Poltergeist, and The Omen. But they like the question is, so are there any remakes that are better than the original?
That is a good question. And again, this is an example question, so I have to go through here. But I'm where I happen to have left off last time through my watch list is a film that is a remake. I guess it's an adaptation from a book, but there's a movie before it, which is The Great Gatsby. And I happen to have watched both of the versions of Great Gatsby. I watched the older version in class, and the newer one on my own. And after reading it, watching the older one's actually pretty good, if I remember correctly. I don't 100% remember, but it had this sort of voyeuristic quality that Baz Luhrmann's also has. Where like the camera kind of like is kind of the eye of God kind of feeling, and you get these very like over the top melodramatic inserts here and there, and it's pretty good. But I would say Baz Luhrmann's version is still better, and I really like that film. But I've talked about that many times on the show, I think. Let's see what else might fit that here. I'm going to leave franchises aside because there's like a billion, like if I talked about Batman, right? Like, I mean, there's like, which one's what are we talking about here? Like, the zillionth iteration of Batman. Let's see. We've got more franchises. Some of these might have remakes that I have no idea about. Some awful films in here. I forget about half of these. Yeah. I don't know if I have much. I don't know if I've watched, because I don't know if I've watched that many where I've watched the original and then watched the remake also. You know, so I might not have too much to say. Let me see what other people are saying here. Ocean's 11. I didn't know there was an Ocean's 11 before the Ocean's 11. That's fascinating. The remake is archetype of a fun heist movie. The original is unwatchable. Interesting. I didn't know that. I thought it was original. The Last of the Mohicans. I also did not know that. I didn't know that was the original film. Maybe part of the thing is too, like, when the sequel or the remake is so much better, the other one just gets deprecated from people's, like, it just gets deleted from history, basically. Man on Fire. I'm not sure I know what that is. Oh, 310 to Yuma. That's a good example.
I mentioned that. I haven't seen the original version, but I know that, like, the ending is completely different. Like, the last scene is completely different.
Right. So this is an interesting one because I've seen the original, but not the new one. I saw the black and white 310 to Yuma, and I really, really liked 310 to Yuma. It was a very charming story, but I can imagine it being even better. Although it was really good. So
yeah, I'd have to see the original. The new one, the ending, it takes out any charm in it that would have been in it. You can go back. I remember I did a whole episode on them.
Yeah, you
on
did.
it. Yeah, and I think I mentioned differences in the ending. We probably talked about it, and so yeah.
Yes. Kai says Denzel Washington. Is in Man on Fire. Okay. It still doesn't come to mind exactly, but yeah. But I'm interested in watching the new 310 to Yuma for sure. Invasion of the Body Snatchers. There's a 56 version of it? Fascinating. Didn't know that. Nolan's Insomnia. What? What? This is blowing my mind that these are remakes. I had no idea.
The original version is Norwegian, which means that there is some translation involved, it looks like.
Ooh, yeah. That's true. Insomnia is an underrated film, I think. It's not like crazy amazing, but I think people forget that he made that film, even though it's pretty good. The Fly and The Thing. The Thing is a remake? This is blowing my mind.
Well, two people mentioned both of those films too. So you get like three mentions of The Fly and The Thing.
What? Wow.
Oh, there's 11 again.
Yeah. I have like the Reading Rainbow thing happening in my mind right now. The more you know. Or is that Reading Rainbow? Wherever that comes from. The more you know. Evil Dead 2. Oh, I don't know anything about that franchise, so apparently. True Grit.
Dune,
okay. Well, from what I've seen of clips of the first one, that makes a lot of sense to me that the new one would be better, although I don't necessarily vibe with the new Dune either. Well, that's a hot take. Oh my gosh, I'm learning so much. The Blob is a remake. Fascinating. Dr. Dolittle is a remake. Fascinating. That's crazy. Now I feel like I want to just like watch some of these original films, and I assume some of them might be so bad they're good. I assume.
The Wizard of Oz and Ben-Hur. Wow.
No way. The Wizard of Oz is a remake. Am I going crazy? Is this a troll?
I don't know.
Got completely wiped from collective memory that they're... That's great. With Judy Garland. What? Oh, the Wizard... Oh, it's a new Wizard of Oz. That makes more sense, right?
No, isn't that the original? Like the classic one, Judy Garland? Yeah. Is there another The Wizard of Oz movie? Here, let's look this up now.
What? Ben-Hur. I mean, there's a zillion Ben-Hurs, so that doesn't surprise me. And I knew True Grit was a remake as well. A Star Is Born is a remake. Oh my gosh, I had no idea. Well, today I learned that there's even less creativity. I'm just kidding. That's
Apparently
interesting.
There's a Nosferatu remake this year.
Interesting. Huh. Well, everything I knew was a lie, and
Oh yeah, there is apparently a 1925 adaptation of The Wizard of Oz.
all right, I have to look this up before we get off stream.
It is a silent film, but that's crazy.
It might be hilarious, or it might be.
Oh my
great.
goodness! The one image that Wikipedia gives of it is horrifying.
That's what I was hoping
Oh,
for.
wow.
That's what I
Yeah.
was hoping for. That's what I was hoping for, people. Let's see. Let's pull up the 1925 Wizard of Oz. Let's see here.
It's like a horror movie.
We should watch this together.
This is not like fit for children.
Absolutely, we should watch this together if this is promising. Yeah, if this has any promise. Let me pull this up here, like so. Yes. Okay. Let's watch together what the heck this is. I kind of want to just like see something. Let's see. It's colorized.
That's no fun if it's colorized.
What?
What is going on there?
It has little chicks in his pants.
Oh my gosh, that was impressive. There's like a little score underneath the whole thing that's extremely quiet. Fascinating. This donkey, you're walking backwards. That's not reverse footage at all. Oh!
Oh, wow.
Okay. This is cool. Yeah, I love it. Oh, wow. There's an organ. What is this? What is this scene?
I don't know.
Scarecrow is terrifying.
Wow, this is pure nightmare fuel right here.
I haven't seen The Wizard of Oz in forever, but don't all these characters appear like with Dorothy only? Or am I wrong?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the question is, which is more true to the original novel?
Yeah, I guess that. Yeah. Well, this is the original, so this I would assume. I mean, it could have made many leaps, but it's possible that this is the more true to the story. I guess.
I don't know.
I don't even know what's happening in this scene. Like, what is going on? That's amazing. Well, anyway. The more you know.
The Wikipedia at least says the film of the 1925 film. The film departs radically from the novel upon which it is based, introducing new characters and exploits. Along with a completely different plot, the film is all set in a world that is only barely recognizable as the Land of Oz.
Fascinating.
Okay.
It's a completely different plot. I guess it just has like Dorothy, Scarecrow, Tin Man, and the Lion.
I do not like that it's colorized on this. If we watch this, we'd have to find a true black and white copy of this.
Is colorization a form of translation? A visual translation?
Ooh.
Because it's
Yes,
not,
right?
It's not the.
Yeah,
it's not the. Yeah.
You have to take liberties too, because there's no way to literally know in a lot of cases what the colors actually were.
Yeah.
So that's fascinating. Yeah, it is.
I say yes. Yeah.
Yeah, what film? One of my favorite films. What is it called? It's a Wonderful Life, classic, black and white and color version, and I've watched them both because I bought a Blu-ray that had both in there, and I think they're both separately charming, even though one is technically not the original, version, the unintended version. I think the translation came out pretty darn well, so that's interesting. Cool. Well, we've come full circle on Mixed Media. So if you've enjoyed this episode, absolutely leave a thumbs up. Leave a comment, too, if you have anything interesting to add to the show. But if you absolutely want to reach us, head over to our Discord at mixedmediapodcast.com. There's a link to our Discord. Click the little Discord icon. Take you right there, and we continue the conversations that we have into the show into the week. And it's super fun. Also, you can join us at mixedmedia.locals.com. If you're on Rumble, there's a little Salmon Join button, and there you'll find perks related to our subscription program, and it really helps us out a lot. The fact that we have a chance to invest some money into the show, super cool. It takes a while still because we still don't. It's not like it's not crazy money, but it's any little bit helps for sure. So you can head over to mixedmedia.locals.com. And speaking of that, shout out to our awesome supporters. We've got 99 Crime, K Kairos, Post, and Alex Egbert supporting there for $5 a month. We super appreciate your guys' help. It really, really does help. And for all those who are watching on Rumble, YouTube, Twitch, definitely hit that like button. It really helps us out. So, did I miss anything?
I don't think so.
Okay, cool. Well, we'll see you next Tuesday at 8
Or Friday.
p.m.
Or Friday.
Oh, Friday. Wait. It's Nathan's turn.
It is my turn.
So what do you do?
So I think it was Kai who mentioned the idea of arguing with myself and looking at my old hot takes and seeing if I still agree with them. Now the issue is there is a lot of footage. So if you guys can streamline the process and send me takes, I would appreciate that. If not, maybe I'll just I don't know. We'll see. Depends, but that is a possibility for sure.
Sweet. Well, you can experience our fun Friday if you go to our Discord, which link is in the description at mixedmediapodcast.com. All right. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching
Or on Friday.
and listening.
Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Look, tell a man no trouble. I don't want beef, man. I just want vibes. Big man like me, no need for the telephone hype. I got too much getting online. One rule, then dead I'm on site. Wrong move, I bet they gon' ride. No need for the telephone hype, nah. No need for the snoozing. Big whip outside, I'm cruising. Big stick inside, no losing. Better watch out for the snake and Judas is. Don't ask them who this is. I bet they know what I'm moving in. I bet I show it into a dim. How you hate and then lose again? How you hating my vibes? Why you wasting my time? Getting hype on my line. Tell a man I don't want feedback, I just want relax. Brand new whip, two-tone, I need that brand new hit. You know, like lean back, brand new bits I live in. We back, man, you never gon' like us. Get them on sight now, let them on light. That way they know I'm more righteous. Look at my life, I'm living alright. I'm nice, you know I'm alright. Cause looking like Christ, no need for the hype or fight or telephone vibe.